Welcome to the Diverse Bookshelf. I'm Samia Aziz, celebrating the power of literature and the voices of authors and changemakers from the global majority. Join me as we explore the stories that inspire, connect, and transform our world. Let's uncover the stories that truly matter together. Today's episode is part of a special mini-series called Ramadan Reflections, where I talk to guests about faith, life, and the month of Ramadan. I'm honoured to be speaking with Yasmin Stannard, a mother, advocate, and campaigner who has been raising awareness and funds for brain cancer in memory of her beloved daughter, Amani. Amani was just 22 years old when she passed away from brain cancer 3 years ago. Since then, Yasmin and her family have dedicated themselves to honouring Amani's legacy through fundraising, awareness campaigns, and by sharing their journey of love, loss, and faith. In this conversation, we reflect on grief, healing, and the ways in which faith helps navigate unimaginable loss, especially during Ramadan, a time of deep spirituality and remembrance. This is an emotional and profound discussion about love, resilience, and the ways we hold on to those we have lost. It's a conversation that I hope brings comfort and connection to anyone who has experienced grief. Assalamu alaikum, Yasmin. Welcome to the Diverse Bookshelf. It's so wonderful to have you on the show. Thank you so much for being here. How are you?
Yeah, alhamdulillah, I'm fine. Jazakallah khairan for inviting me here. I feel honoured to be invited as a guest, so Jazakallah khairan for that. But alhamdulillah.
Uh, I'm so grateful for your time, and I really hope that this will be a conversation that will be super insightful and hopefully helpful and healing to others and hopefully to ourselves as well. And so, you do a lot of work to raise awareness about brain cancer, which is what your daughter passed away from 3 years ago now, and I've been following your work for a long time and it's really amazing everything that you do. And before we get into the loss of Amani and how faith has helped you or is continuing to help you in the work that you're doing, I wondered if you could just tell us a little bit about Amani. What was she like? What are some of your fondest memories of her?
Yeah, I mean, mine was my firstborn. There's always something about the firstborn because you get like one-on-one time with them. You're not sharing with other children and what have you. But she was
Mm.
just an absolute delight from the moment she was born and until sadly the moment she passed. But yeah, she was just full of life, full of love, joy. She would speak with sort of like a twinkle in her eye, and she would always speak with a little giggle in her voice. And she wasn't somebody that you never really saw her down in the dumps too much, and she was always interested in helping other people. She'd always, if somebody else was going through something, she would always try and be there to help them and support them. And she was little bit of a life and soul of her friendship groups as well in some ways. So it was a bit of a big adjustment when she fell ill, and this sort of larger for life character sort of did slightly change. I mean, morphed into an equally as great version of herself with her brain cancer diagnosis. But yeah, she was just a real delight to be around. And as a daughter, she would always come home and share her stories with us when she'd been out. So it was always nice to sort of feel included to her life. I think that's a bit of a blessing. It doesn't always, it's not always that case with parents and children, But yeah, and we were quite fortunate. She never really had the teenage years, so to speak, which people tend to go through. And then, on reflection now, I just feel like it was because her life was so, it was just the way that Allah planned it, because her life was just going to be so short. Obviously, none of us knew that. I think maybe that it was so filled with just such happiness for her and such blessing of such amazing friends. And yeah, and we didn't have those wasted years where a lot of us do have with children, when it just all gets a bit complicated, and that's
Mm.
just seems to be the run of the mill way. But it wasn't that for Amani. So yeah, she was an absolute blessing, and she still continues to be a blessing in her passing as well. So we're very proud, mashallah.
Yeah, mashallah. I mean, I didn't know her while she was alive, but I feel like I know her now,
Yeah,
from everything that I see, the legacy that she's left behind. But and obviously that is testament to the work that you're doing and your family is doing, but also just to Imani to have left the impact that she has, on her friends, on people that knew her, but people that didn't. She did, even when she was very unwell, she did some incredible work. in raising awareness, but also talking about faith and fate as well, which is so, it feels so brave for somebody so young to have done something so big at such a incredibly testing time of her own life.
Yeah,
And yeah, it's, I think, it gives a lot of people going through a whole range of challenges in life that bit of courage.
yeah.
Um,
I think with mine,
as
she
a
was
yeah.
always very articulate, very intelligent, and sort of didn't like to shy away.
Mm,
So I think, and it helped her so much sharing her story. I can't imagine going through what we went through with her brain cancer. It's just like such a horrendous illness and a deterioration that you have to witness. And for her, so many changes. It was in the middle of lockdown as well, of COVID. So there were so many restrictions of not being able to go anywhere, people not being able to visit. So it just gave us an outlet and something to focus on, and it just benefited her. I mean, mashallah, it's so amazing. It's benefited so many other people, but really, it gave Marnie a purpose and a focus, because it's so easy to get consumed in what's going on in your life and the darknesses and whatever. But Marnie, one of her famous quotes, is always to look at the light. Don't focus on the darknesses in your life, to focus on the
mm,
light, and she was very good at doing that.
yeah.
Yeah, but it helped her immensely, mashallah.
Yeah, that's really so beautiful and so inspiring to look at the light, because sometimes it can feel like there isn't any light when everything feels so dark. But
Yeah,
I guess the reminder is to keep looking because it
yeah,
is
and
there.
there were days, obviously, it's not like every day we were all like really
Mm,
positive and what have you. It was, but it's just being patient through those times when you are really low, and obviously our faith helps us immensely, isn't it, to have that faith, that there's something good to come on the other side, in the hereafter. So that's a massive motivator. But I think with Amani as well, it was always she was always thinking about other people and um, how worse it could have been. You should always used to say, well, what if I was in Gaza? Literally, they can't even
mm,
get to a hospital. I mean, obviously, she would have hated to see what's happening now, but she would always look to other people. What about people who don't have a family to support them? Like we're always arguing her corner. What about people who haven't got that? What about people who haven't got a house to live under, haven't got the comfort of a house? So she'd always be thinking of that, and so in some ways, actually feel a bit ungrateful that she was still sort of finding things difficult. But that, I mean, I suppose that helped her through.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, I can relate to that very, very, very slightly. Like recently, I faced a health crisis and I was in hospital for a week, but it felt, oh my gosh, it felt like as many months.
A
I was
lifetime.
in for 7 days, but it felt like I was there for 7 months. And at one point, I was very frustrated and really upset, and I was so eager to come home. But I was having an issue with the doctors, and I kind of felt like they weren't listening and they weren't giving me the information correctly. And I had my husband there to advocate when I was feeling too unwell. He was asking the right questions. And afterwards, I just felt like, oh my gosh, what a blessing to have someone who was able to advocate on my behalf. But so many people don't have that. When you're navigating a minefield of whatever health issue within a health system where doctors are trained to do a certain job,
Yeah,
and they're not always tactful or gentle. They're not always thinking about the best form of communication, because for them, this is just their job. This is science. This is medicine. And really having a network of support, whatever that looks like, whether it's one person, whether it's 50 people, is so comforting, even if in the moment that it's happening you don't see it. But I think to
yeah,
know that it's there, I think
yeah,
is
definitely.
hugely
I think
helpful.
with Amani's, because her diagnosis was always terminal at the start.
Mm,
And we were blessed. I think we did have good, medical team and everything, but it was a terminal diagnosis. So for them, when we were starting to look at alternative treatments, they were just like thinking, I don't think they quite understood it. But for us, even if it did only buy us maybe a year extra with the money, 6 months extra with the money, Allah knows best. But to Marnie and for us, and as a family and with her friends, that was everything to us. Whereas like the medical team, won't be obviously pushing as hard as a family will to get those extra months.
yeah.
And obviously, and we were hoping it would be a lifelong cure, that the medicine she went on, but it stopped working after a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's Qadar. But yeah, you definitely need a team behind you.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
absolutely. It's
mm,
important to get that balance right of listening to the doctors and understanding the medical advice, and also just trusting your own gut feeling, and knowing what it is that you want you for yourself and for your family, or whatever it is that you kind of, your body. Sometimes you know what's right, what's best, and you place your faith in different things, and to find that balance, definitely. But obviously, like, it it it's so, I think it's so wonderful in so many ways that you have such beautiful memories of your child, but this is an immense loss, for you personally, as her mother, for your entire family, but also for the community, um more widely. And I don't just mean, like, our town of Luton, but the Muslim community, I would say, as a whole, but the world more generally. And grief is such a big beast, if you like, or just a big machine, that is very complex, and I think very individual as well. And I think it changes over time. But how has your understanding of grief evolved over the past 3 years,
oh,
if it has at all?
yeah. I think for a long time, maybe a year or so, I would always just say grief is so weird because it's just everything you don't expect it to be. It's everyone's worst nightmare to lose a child. And I think when I knew that Marnie was going to be was near to the end, I was just like thinking, I'm not going to be able to walk. I'm not going to be able to get out of bed. I can't imagine how I'm going to get to the janaza. So then when I could walk and I could do the ghusl and go to the janaza and stand straight and even drove to the burial, those sort of things, you're just like, how's that even possible? But then I think within time you realize that's Allah carrying you, because if it was down to me, I would have gone to that day Marnie passed away. I would have gone to bed and never got up again. I think because that's instinctively that's what you want to do. But I think there's lots of, you go through lots of emotions. I think at the start there was a lot of shock, um, lots of, I think because we were caring for Marnie and that was so intense for 22 months we were caring for Marnie. I think we were always like on this treadmill, but at the same time we were always like trying to put a brave face on and be all, make it all have happy moments with Amani and all this sort of stuff. And I think looking back, I didn't know at the time, but I think looking back, I didn't know how to switch that off. So I think I just carried on, like not being happy or anything like that. But I just thought, you know, what do I do now? What do I do now? When you've been so busy for 22 months, you're just like, so what do I do now? And I, hadn't worked since I was pregnant with Amani, which was like 25 years ago. And I ended up getting a full-time job
Mm,
within 6 months after Amani passing away, which in hindsight is probably not the, I mean, in some ways it helped a lot, but
it's very
in
quick.
in hindsight, to go back to work for the first time ever since, for 25 years, holding all that grief, and I did have I had to take 3 months off a year later after being at work for a full time, delayed grief maybe because I think I had to have therapy, or I wanted to have therapy, and I think my therapist just helped me give myself permission, which sounds really strange, but gave myself permission to grieve. I remember in most of my sessions, which she used to say, "You've been through so much," and her just keep on saying that, even though I knew I'd been through so much. There's no way that I didn't know, but I think, and I found it very difficult to cry in the first year, and I think I realised that I was worried that if I cry, will I ever be able to switch it off? So it's literally just that such fear that it's just so weird. You think, how can you not cry? I mean, there were times I cried, but generally I was just sitting in this frozen, numb state of, holding all this grief, and it just comes out in other ways. If you're not crying, I mean, crying, I've realized now, tears are such a mercy from Allah, but if you don't release your tears, and I know it's not straightforward, it's not easy sometimes, then you start, by the time when I was having to go on my sick leave from work, I was like being suspicious, I was angry, I was, irritable, there was just so many emotions, my low self-esteem, angry at myself more than anybody else. So if you don't allow yourself to process, that's what I've realized, if you don't allow yourself to process your grief, it will come out in other ways, and they're quite negative and very self-destroying, for yourself. Um, yeah, so I think I've learned for grief is to give it space. You just 100% have to give it space. You can't expect yourself to carry on as you were. You have to change things. You might have to, I've had, maybe a lot of last year I was just quite at home a lot. I did sort of see friends here and there, but generally I just cut back on things I could do, um, just as a self-preservation. And I feel like I sort of have to um, protect my grief. And I'm much more mindful of what I do, because I can, just before Ramadan, I was falling into doing too much again, and you can just, but I know that I need to give space for it. Um, and I think as well, just leaning into to Allah and the Quran and stuff like that was is helped me so much. But in my first year, I found that very difficult because you just got so many questions, you got so many, your world has literally been flipped, that you just, yeah, and it's scary actually. I was very scared at that point because I was, I've been always so strong in my faith, and I'd never lost faith. I kept praying and everything, but I think I was just, um, just the normal things that you have to accept when you're just normally going through life. You just have to understand it in such a deeper level when you've gone through
Mm.
grief and you've lost a child, and that takes time. I think it takes a lot of questioning in, and we'll probably go into later the sort of things I did do that's helped me with that. But it was very very scary in that moment where you just yeah, you put up a lot of barriers and you don't really know where to turn.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I know that so many of the times when we experience loss, we often think about it in terms of like justice or something something that was a right that was taken away, or especially in the case of Amani, because she was so young, immediately it feels like we want to say like, "Oh, it was so wrong because she was so young." And just that terminology of it being wrong versus
Gone
being
too
right.
soon. Yeah,
Yeah, and that sort of like it's an injustice, but at the same time believing that Allah is always just and Allah is always good, and whatever happens, there is justice and goodness within that.
yeah. I think
And
for me as well,
yeah.
I was feeling so, you feel so terrible. A part of you, it literally is, isn't it? As a mother, your
Mm.
child is a part of you and always will be a part of you. When that goes, um, you just feel so terrible, so upset. You don't know how to. You lose your identity as a mother. You lose, in so many, so many layers to grief, um, and it just you 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 feel so terrible that you're thinking, well, how can there be love in this from Allah? I think that I felt like I knew that I needed to be as close as I could be to Allah in that moment. In this video, I'm talking more about the first year, but I felt the furthest away from Him than I'd ever had done in my life, and that's what was, I think, so scary. And didn't quite know how to navigate, because you're so tired. The things that you used to be able to do, your brain doesn't work as well in grief. So the things you would be able to read, you're just in, shock mode, I suppose, in a lot of ways in the first year. Yeah, so I think that was very very hard time,
Mm.
definitely.
And I mean, and now there's a lot of like literature on grief from, like a whole range of spectrum, including from the Islamic faith, and even just like a lot of like quotes and stuff floating around on social media. And sometimes people describe grief as being this thing that comes in waves. That
Yeah,
it's like, you could be plodding along fairly normally, and all of a sudden you'll be hit by this wave, and then it will fade away, and then it will be like a cycle and happen again. Um, in your experience, for you, has it felt like waves, or has it felt more constant and something that has changed as a
I
constant
think it's
thing?
both. I think,
Mm,
and I don't know whether it's particular to losing a child, but I think our baseline is this undercurrent of upset throughout everything. Even though I can go to work with a smile on my face, I can go somewhere socially and have a smile on my face and crack a joke here or there. Probably not a very good joke, but but yeah, but in the depths of me, is like the undercurrent of sadness, and that I think. I mean, obviously, I don't know. I'm only three years into my grief, but I feel like that potentially will always be there. And I think now that I'm out of this numbness, and actually interacting with my grief more, I think also these waves come because we've just had the 3 year anniversary. So then that was another wave, so and it might just be, sometimes watching TV and it might be about a mother and a daughter. So then a little wave will come over, I'll get teary, or it might be about sisters. And I feel for my girls that they've lost their sister, when I see grown up sisters, and I'm like, well, they're never going to have that. So yeah, and it can just literally come from anywhere. So, and just finding something that you've forgotten, a memory that you've forgotten, and you stumble across it, and yeah, yeah. So I think I would say it's both. For me, it's both at the moment. Whether that will change.
Hmm. And you mentioned Amani's sisters, and I feel like this must add so many layers of complexity for you because these are also your children who are navigating their grief, but they're also witnessing your grief and you're also witnessing their grief.
Yeah.
And so, how has it been for you as a family to
Mm.
support each other through that, but also hold space for how you're feeling as individuals? Because each one of you had a different relationship with Amani, and that is
Yeah.
in and of itself something that needs to be protected. So,
Yeah.
how are you navigating it as a family?
I mean, I think that's the one thing that I just find really hard because I know that everyone says there's no right and wrong in grief, but I'm not sure whether I've been whether as a family unit, it's just been so difficult. We're all, like you
Mm,
said, I feel like when it first happened, we were just like a grenade where we were just in different parts of the house coping alone. Because I think when you suffer a grief, I think I've realized you just can't, you haven't even though it's my children, you haven't got the capacity to, you can only see your own grief. um, and I think as well, and I feel bad about it. I don't know whether other mums have the same, but I think I put a barrier up to my about my children's grief because I was like, because obviously we take so much on of our own children, and I was struggling so much myself. It was hard to hear their grief as well. Obviously, I would if need be, but yeah, I mean, if I could do the last 3 years all over again, I would try to be better be there for my children more. I mean, obviously, we were still there as a unit. I think the complication is the children don't want to come to me with their grief because they know that I've got I'm dealing with my own, and their ages. 20, well, when Marnie passed away, I think they were, I don't know, 16, 17 and 21. Um, so they're not particularly, at that age, they don't come to you so much as a mum as well with their issues. So there's all that complication. So it's just very difficult. I think people on the outside have a view. I mean, I think when I used to hear about like families that the husband and wife the husband and wife would split up after a child loss. I was always never used to understand it. I would think, well, how is that possible? Surely you come together, right? But it's just so complicated, and I think you have to learn that everyone else has their grief in their own way, and you have to, they're not going to grieve like you're grieving, so you can't like say, oh, why are they not crying as much as I'm crying, or why are they happy today and I'm not happy today? It's all just, yeah, I think just having respect for other people's grief and just understanding everybody else. But I just wish I could have been more there for them. Maybe if you spoke to them, they'd say I was there enough. But as a mums, you
yeah.
always want to be there better and more. So yeah, I think that is difficult. That's a difficult issue for me. Is how we deal as a family because we're still figuring
Yeah.
it out.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, just thinking about it, recently we had one of my cousins, her husband passed away last January of last year, 2024. And I've been thinking about this a lot. Like, this is about everybody has lost this person, but the family have lost this person also. And it's so difficult to just to think about like how everyone can sort of interact with their grief. And sometimes you have to, as one person, the only thing you have capacity to do is to focus on your own grief. And that doesn't mean that that's going to always be the case. And it might be that actually all of you at that one moment in time feel like that is the way that you need to do it, and that's okay. And and like you said earlier on as well, like it's about also giving it the time, acknowledging it, and allowing it to come out in the way that it needs to come out. And there is no blueprint for any of this stuff, but I hope anyone in a situation similar to the one that you've been in is that they understand that it's okay if
Mm,
if you have these questions, if you have these concerns, that am I there enough for my
yeah.
children or my other family members,
Mm,
and that they're not expected to get everything perfect, because you just can't, you simply
and I
can't.
think that's and the actual, the like I was saying about the different layers of grief, that's another layer of the grief, is that
Mm,
your family is so different to how it was, and we had 22 months of our family being very different, with Amani being ill. So I always sort of think, I try now sort of to try and remember, remind the kids. I was like saying to my daughter the other day, "Oh, do you remember at Sahur time we used to do, the kids used to do like Jill Barb races. They put Jill Barb races and they run across the lounge before prayer and stuff like that." And I try and remember, because I think we've all forgotten how normal our life was and how lovely our life was as a family. So now I'm trying to sort of remind everybody of that as much as I can, because it's so easy to think that, oh, well, our family's always been like this, but no, it hasn't always been like this. It's sadly like this, and you feel like you've spent your whole life, and I chose to be a stay-at-home mum, and I was blessed enough to be able to do that. Um, so you feel like you've sacrificed everything to build your family, and then when you go through something like this, you literally, after Money passed away, and the weeks after that, you just feel like you're standing in a rubble of everything. You've just literally, and it's not anything really our fault. It was just,
mm,
I always say, like, you can have all the best made plans, be the best parent ever, but life happens. And for
yeah.
us, life happened, and we were just like standing in the rubble of our family. And I was just like in this emotional state, thinking, I have no idea how to fix this, and you just don't know what, and it's really difficult. And I'm sure there's loads of ways that we are better now as a family, 3 years on, and I do hold hope that in years to come, we certain things will happen, and happy things will happen in our family, and slowly, we'll get to a better state. But yeah, it's difficult.
Inshallah. Yeah, of course it's difficult. And you mentioned the jilbab races
Mm.
at Sahur, and I know that Ramadan is a really it can be a really challenging time when it comes to grief. I think this is a lot of people experience this. It's the time that you notice the absence more, I think, because Ramadan is such a family time. So much of it is about family traditions, and you know, even when we look around the world and we think that there were so many people that were here in Ramadan last year that are not with us this year, and when we think about what this Ramadan in Gaza looks like compared to last year or the year before, um, and it's really, it is really difficult. And but for you, what does Ramadan bring, both in terms of comfort and in terms of challenge when it comes to your family and your journey of grief?
Yeah. I mean, I think, if I'm truthful, I think it's still a challenge,
Mm,
entering into Ramadan. I think previous Ramadans, um, I was worried about the thought of even having to fast, because you're thinking, I'm barely breathing here. It's just so much for me to just go from moment to moment, and I've got to add fasting on top of that. So this year, I don't, that hasn't been so much of a concern for me, which alhamdulillah is a good thing. Whether that means it's always going to be like that in future Ramadans, or it's yeah. So I think that's really difficult. I think the um, yeah, I think it was difficult the first year of with not having Amani, because she was my little Taraweeh buddy. We'd pray Taraweeh prayers together, and then she wasn't there. Um, yeah, but I think and also for us as well, with Mani fell ill in Ramadan. So this was Ramadan 2020, is when she, was only a few days into Ramadan, she collapsed with a seizure. She was rushed to hospital. She was away from us for 12 days in the hospital by herself because of COVID. We weren't allowed to see her. We were getting brain cancer and terminal diagnosis and prognosis through a phone rather than in front of her, and we were dealing with all that. So um, sometimes it's not just the loss of a loved one. For some families, it's actually the trauma of what happened in Ramadan as well. So it's just a lot of layers. And I think for us as well, well, for me, I can only speak for me, but the Ramadan is supposed to be about your relationship with the Quran and reading much more. But I think at the early days, um, you know, it's hard when the Quran becomes a trigger for you, because you used to play it when Amani was ill. You used to pray it when she was anxious and what have you. So that was so. Then you sort of you enter a month where there's more focus on you. You should be interacting with the Quran, and you're just like, this is at the moment is hard for me. So I think what I've learned, over the previous years, is just to recognize that it is a blessed month, and even though the fears of, oh my word, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to fast, you do always fast, and mashallah, you always enjoy, or from my experience, you enjoy the fast, and it does bring some sort of like calm within you for the hours that you're fasting, and I think it's very important to 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 be mindful of where you're at, and just come to Ramadan as you are. And Ramadan isn't for people who are perfect, people who are, Allah knows what we've all been through. Allah knows what we've lost. Allah knows what we're struggling with. Allah knows what reminders is in Ramadan. And He just wants us to come as we are and do what we can. So I think it's always, I think I've learned to just be more mindful of what I can give. I mean, the first Ramadan, I think, because mine had passed in the February, and I can't remember, Ramadan maybe was March, April time then. And I think for me, I just couldn't read the Quran in Arabic then, because when Mani was ill, I don't know whether it was because of this, but when Mani was ill, we read Quran together from beginning to end. This is what she wanted to do, and we did that. So I don't know whether it was a little bit of sort of trauma that reading the Quran without Amani, or just my barrier of sort of being a little bit of crisis of faith, or I don't know. But so I decided to read the Quran in English, cover to cover, in that first Ramadan, because I just circled every ayah that was talking about paradise, every ayah that was talking about Allah's in control, every ayah that's talking about Allah's merciful, all those sort of things I just needed reassurance for, and that's what I needed to hear right now. I wanted to hear what Mani, where Mani was, what's to come for me, where Mani is now. I needed to remember, all those ayahs that Allah, that we belong to Allah. I needed to be reassured of that. So I think sometimes you just have to find what's going to work for you, and whatever you're going through in that particular Ramadan. Um, I think last year, for Ramadan, I joined a class, Quranic Ocean class, of Tadabbur, which is reflection of the Quran. So that whole of Ramadan, again, I don't think I was reciting much, but I think I was delving into all of the content and reflecting deeply about the Quran, and that covers a lot of like emotional. The way that the Samuel Mubarak does it is it brings in a lot of emotion of the Quran and how Allah recognizes your emotion. So for me, last year that was really good. And then this year, I suppose in some ways I'm having more of a normal Ramadan in inverted commas, but I'm reading Arabic, Quran in Arabic more, and that's been a long journey for me to be able to do that, and then also reading the English as well, and again circling my ayahs that I need that speak to me, and I need reassurance from. So I think it's very easy when you're in Ramadan to look at everyone else and what everyone else is doing, but you have to remember you're grieving, and you're not going to be able to do, what you can do. And I've tried to think, I was quite overwhelmed actually on the first day of Ramadan this year, and I was thinking, oh my word, I'm overwhelmed already, and it's only the first day. But I think you just need to just think what think, feel with your heart, and do what you can. Don't overdo it, because grief is already exhausting in and of itself. And I always think to myself as well that if one day I can't pray my Tarawih prayers, or I can't read as much Quran as I would have liked to, and I'm really, really having a bad grief day, then, maybe I can lay there and I can do dhikr. And, there's ways of bringing worship in where you're at, and what's going to be easy for you. And I think always remembering that Allah knows. He knows what we're going through, and that's taken me a lot of to get me to that stage. But yeah, I think that's priceless, knowing that that Allah understands. And then also that maybe 2 rakats from somebody in their first year of grief would weigh heavier than somebody doing 20 rakats, that's not, have got different life challenges, but so it's all weighed differently depending on what you're going through. So I think try not to get overwhelmed by what everyone else is doing, and just try and really focus on what you need from this Ramadan, and what you can physically do in this Ramadan, and not feeling guilty that your grief is maybe, you can see it as holding you back, but it's where you're at, and it's natural that you're not able to do as much as you could once do.
Yeah, that's such a beautiful reminder, I think, for anyone facing any type of challenge, even if it's just the everyday
Yeah,
struggle of the
yeah,
responsibilities of life, right? That Ramadan does not demand perfection of us, but
no,
I think we have this thinking that, like, but this is the month of the year, and I have to pray all my salah on time, I have to do all the extra ibadah and dhikr, I have to read the whole Quran, I have to make sure that I'm doing 8 or 20 rakah of Taraweeh every night. We put a lot of pressure on ourselves, and obviously we should strive to do as much as possible. But sometimes we can't. And as you rightly said, like, Allah knows what our circumstances are, how heavy our hearts are, how tired our body is, and inshallah, every little thing that we do will be rewarded. And it's about also the action of trying, the intention behind it, which you said, like, if you're struggling with your grief so much that you just physically can't get up to pray Tarawih one night, but you're resting and you're doing dhikr, you're trying to compensate in some ways. You're still reaching out to Allah, you're still remembering, you're still worshipping in many ways. And I think that's such a powerful and beautiful reminder.
mm,
Um, and you have we have mentioned a few times about the role that faith can play more generally, in terms of grief, even outside of Ramadan. So what are some of the ways that faith has supported you through your loss over the last
yeah.
3 years?
I mean, I think I've said it repeated times that I just cannot imagine going
Mm,
through a loss of a daughter, and when she was ill as well, without faith.
mm,
I just don't see how people do it. I
mm,
really can't. I mean, I think it helps so much knowing, as soon as Marnie passed away, I, I, I I stopped worrying about her. Obviously, throughout the 22 months of seeing her ill, it's such a worry as a parent. You know that even when your kid's got, I don't know, um, a high temperature, the amount of stress it causes us. But when see them losing their eyesight, losing their ability to walk, losing their ability to, their short-term memory goes, all the sort of things you expect an old person to go through. We watched our 23-year-old daughter have to go through. Um, but I think, having faith just just helps you to ground you, and to know that everything that you go through is, an elevation for you, as an expiation for you. And so when Marnie passed away, I just obviously I was upset and distraught in that moment, but at the same time, I just inshallah knew that she was now free from her body that had literally just been consumed by this illness, that she was in Jannah. And so you don't have to worry about her anymore, mashallah. And I just know that she was such a happy person in this world, but I just know that her happiness, inshallah, now is beyond measure to anything we would have seen now. So that's, if you, that so that's definitely a comfort. And I think, for me, I think what's helped me so much in my grief, but I think it's like you said, for anybody going through any difficulties, is that, you have to trust Allah with qadar. You have to trust Allah. And I did a Children of Jannah grief course in my first Ramadan, and the first thing that really stuck out to me is the sister was saying, "How can you trust Allah if you don't know Allah?" And that really struck with me. And after the course, thankfully we had a little WhatsApp group with the sisters, and we started week by week. Going through and reflecting on the name of Allah every single week, and that's been going since 22, and we're now, I can't remember what number we're at, like name 60 something, or maybe even 70. And that's helped us all so much, because you have to, like you were saying earlier, you have to know that even if it doesn't make sense to, my life has not played out how, if I chose it, it's not played out how I would have chosen it. But you have to know that Allah has decided in His wisdom what is right for Mani, and then by default what's right for us, and it will all make sense in the hereafter. So
And in His love and mercy also.
yes, 100%.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So that, I think that, I think as a Reva, I think I always struggled with knowing that Allah loved me. And when he used to hear other people just instinctively, when something goes wrong, saying, "Oh, there's good in it, and Allah loves you," and all this. And I used to always be confused at that, because I was like, well, how do you get to that? I didn't know how you got to being so sure that Allah loved you. And especially if you're somebody that's sort of a little bit sort of self-critical, it's very hard. You think that Allah's thinking those things of you. So I think knowing the names of, learning the names of Allah has just been an absolute life raft um, in my grief. And I hope, inshallah, that's from, because I know that this isn't going to be my only test. There's going to be many, many more to come. And I hope, inshallah, that helps me through other ones as well. So I think knowing Allah is absolutely critical. And I think for me, my relationship with the Quran has changed, because I think before Amani fell ill, and I always used to think the Quran was something, it was an additional, something additional you do. It's maybe something in some ways a tick box or whatever, but I just felt like it was like an extra. So whenever anything was difficult in my life, I always just think, well, I can't do this extra because I'm just struggling so much. So I'll stop reading Quran, because I haven't got. I'll do my prayers and the farads and everything that I'm obligated to do. But I think through the classes that I'm doing and everything, I think I realize how the Quran is such a healing and such an anchor for you, and how much, even on your most rubbish days, I always try to read Quran, and I, pretty much every single day read Quran now, and it's I feel like now it's become a part of my life, and I hope, inshallah, that whatever comes in the future, I hope I will hold on to that as well, because it's not like a something additional that you do if you have time. It's just so essential to us in our lives. And and I think even the rest, because I'm doing tajweed classes at the moment as well, and I think even the recitation of the Quran is just the melody of it. It does something to your body. I think, just all those, the sounds. So so I think, yeah, those sort of things. I think knowing Allah, and just realizing how much you just need the Quran. And there's ayahs in. I mean, I'm not good at quoting ayahs, but there's ayahs in the Quran that sort of like say that that we're supposed to hold fast to Allah in difficult times, and that what better way than through His words, His perfect words in the Quran. And I think as well, dua as well. I think that's improved since going through my losing Amani, and I've just seen it more now as divine conversations. I like to call it, rather than dua. And yeah, I like to. I mean, I think I'm in need of improvement, but I guess it's all a journey. But yeah, trying to take every emotion to Allah. So I think, sometimes when you get upset by, maybe you've been triggered by somebody's comment to you or something, I think it's nice to maybe take that to Allah. Because I think, because sometimes you might take it to a friend or whatever, and not obviously backbiting, but like saying, "Oh, somebody said this to me," without saying who it was. It doesn't really resolve anything, but if you take it to Allah, then sometimes you can figure it out, and just go. And even I think a couple of weeks ago, it felt like for the first time I was feeling really angry at what Mani went through and how the cancer changed her. But then just taking that to Allah as well, because who better person, not person, but who better to take it to than the one that hears us and knows, knows fully what we're feeling, and is the only one that can help us in that moment. And I think as well, my relationship with Vicar, I think, has improved as well. Where I just sometimes just I find, because again, I never really, maybe it's been a revert or just me, I never really understood Vicar as well. I was like thinking, well, how can just saying this name again and again, or saying this, this dua again and again help? But I feel like it's a way of just get, coming into the refuge of Allah, and just, you can just really feel sort of in his presence, and yeah, so I think that's really, yeah, so all of those things I think have really helped, but it's been a very, very slow and long process for me to get to
Mm.
that.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's more development that I will need and more things to come. But yeah, and that's all been mostly last year. I've been working on those sort of things, and it's all been, and it's all from Allah as well. Literally, He puts things in your path. There's this, like the classes that I do, that's from Allah. The sisters circle with the Allah's name, that's all from Allah. It's not from us, it's from Him. So He's helping us, and it's good to see when He's helping us through it, and it helps you
Yeah.
feel held. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think that's so like so powerful and so profound. So Alia Umrayan, who is
Mhm.
also she's a Revert sister and
Yeah.
does a lot of work
Yes,
for
definitely.
Reverts. She has a book called The Power of Dua. I don't know if you
Yes.
read it, but
Yeah, I've got it. I haven't read it yet. Yeah.
I read it last year, and she talks a lot about the importance and the power of knowing Allah. And she does it through the lens of dua. So she says that we limit our duas because we are limited in our understanding of Allah. Whereas, like, if we really understood the sort of the power of Allah, but His mercy and His love, and if we understood that there is no limits in Allah's provision and there is no limits in His justice and no limits in His mercy, we would be unlimited in what we ask for and how we ask for it.
Yeah.
And it's just such a like such an incredible reminder that so many times, I will raise my hands in dua, and I will feel like I can't ask for this thing. This thing feels massive. Like I can't ask for this thing, or this is such a huge thing that I'm asking for. Why would Allah give it to me? But her reminder is that no, but Allah can give it to you. And if He wills, He will give it to you if it's good for you. And I think that that's such an important thing to hold on to. And she also talks about this, you spoke about taking your struggles or your any complaints you have, take them to Allah. And she talks about doing it in like a almost like a, what's it called, like when you go to court, like a
Mhm.
trial.
Okay. Hmm.
So she says that, present your case, make your case to Allah, present all the evidence to Allah, make your case, make your argument, whatever it is that you're saying. And you have all the evidence, and you can say, you can even call on witnesses in your mind that so and so said this, and I heard this from this person, and I read this, and I saw this article that further strengthens my case, and present it all to Allah and leave it, and leave it as you would in a court to the judge. You leave it to the judge, and Allah is the judge of all judges, right? So you leave it to Allah, and you trust that Allah is gonna make a make a decision. He's going to make a ruling, and at some point, whether it's within hours or days or months or years, or maybe even not in this life, maybe in the next life, you're going to see the outcome of this trial. And it's such a and I had never really come across it in that sort of illustrative way before, but I was very, very bogged down by something that it was something completely, it wasn't even related to me. It was something I could see somebody else doing, and actually like in an organization, and I was completely devastated by this thing that was happening, and I was also devastated by my inability to do anything about it. I couldn't stop these people from doing this thing that I perceived to be awful. And I asked Alia, and she said, present your case to God. And I and I did, and I just remember the instant feeling of relief I had,
Yeah,
which
that's
is, you
right.
know what, it's okay because Allah has this.
Yeah, yeah,
And he's always had it, but he's had it because he has it, and I know that I have also helped contribute to that now because I've
yeah,
added to this case.
yeah, yeah, no,
Um,
definitely.
and then you just wait and you see, and in my case, like I feel like I can see that Allah has made a there's a word at legal time, I don't know, he's made a decision. I can
Mhm.
see some of that is already happening, but I trust that actually, even if it doesn't happen in this life, it will happen in the next
That's
life. And I
right.
think there's something really powerful about
Mhm.
that, almost like that tool.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Talking about Alia Umrayan, this year, I think I was gifted probably quite soon after Mani passed away, the Ramadan Reflections book.
Mm.
But I was just like, it's taken until this year where I've actually thought, actually, that's quite a nice, sort of, you know, just nice little activities. I'm trying to do that this year. Just every day read, and she talks about reflection, and she's saying if you don't stop to reflect, then how are you ever going to get close to Allah? And I think that this year I think I've because this year I've been doing a lot of studies. I think sometimes you just do so much studies and it's out of it's from a good place, but sometimes you're like, I'm doing all these studies, but I don't feel like I'm feeling closer to Allah. So I think I've realized that sometimes it's obviously you've got to do the doing and the striving, but sometimes it's in the stopping and reflecting. So yeah, so that's really nice. So yeah, and being grateful, and yeah, so I'm just in the obviously the only first few chapters, but and I know a few of my other friends as well, that's doing that this year, who are also suffering from grief. Yeah, because it's nice to like a gentle activity that you can do. Yeah, so that's nice.
Yeah, it is a good one, that, and I feel like that's a nice one to also come back to later. Like, although it's like 30 chapters, one per day for
Mhm.
Ramadan, but there's no reason why we can't dip in and out of that book throughout the
Yeah.
whole year. I thought those
Also, I
are
was thinking because I had a Ramadan and sorry, Dua and Me book from a sister. She's it's sold here, but she's from South Africa, um, and I got that out again this year, and it was quite interesting to look back at the duas that I'd written last year. And I was like thinking, oh, that's fun. Like, I was saying the same things as I was at the beginning of this Ramadan about feeling overwhelmed and what have you. So it was quite interesting thinking, well, I need to this is something I need to address early on in Ramadan is my overwhelm and really prioritize what I need to do. But one of my duas that I wrote down from last year was like asking Allah to make me close to the Quran. And subhanallah, from where I was last year to where I am now is like night and day. And I know it's still a very huge journey, and it never ends with the Quran. But it's nice sometimes to look back. So when I first started with the Ramadan Reflections, I was thinking, oh, I won't write in the book because you don't like to sort of.
mm.
But I've actually started underlining. I've started writing in it because I was thinking it would actually be quite nice to look back next Ramadan and
Yeah.
see what I was reflecting then, and I'm sure I'll have different reflections next year.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a lovely book actually, mashallah.
Yeah, that is really really great. And you and your family, you've done a lot of work over the years, ever since I think Amani's diagnosis, a lot of work and Amani did it herself also, to raise awareness and funds for about brain cancer. And so much of this is connected to the legacy that Amani has left and continues to grow. Can you talk a little bit about the work that you're doing in terms of that, and what you're hoping to achieve?
Yeah, I think it started off, like you said, when Amani was ill. So it was more about raising an awareness because we didn't obviously know until you get a diagnosis. You don't realize that for brain cancer, they receive like 1% of the cancer research budget from the government compared to other cancers. So all the other cancers get so much more money, and because of that, their treatments have improved. Their prognosis rates have improved. But with brain cancer, how's nothing's improved. But how is anything going to improve if you don't invest money, especially when it's an organ so complex as the brain? So that's where our sort of first journey on Instagram really started was because we do a lot of work with brain tumor research. They do a lot of lobbying of the government. So back then in 2020, they had like a petition because the government has like ring fence money um, to go to brain research projects, but it's still not getting to the scientists. that are applying for the money. So there's like a bit of a disconnect. So there's a lot of campaigning for that. So we have tried to do campaigning. I would say I don't feel like I'm very strong in a campaigning. We've tried our bit. We've got mashallah, we've got our local Luton MP Sarah Owen involved, and she's amazing, and she's now part of the all party parliamentary group for brain tumours, and she's very she's very passionate about it as well. Yeah, but I think sometimes you have to, so we try and do what we can, but I think lobby inside, I'm not sure how much we can bring to the table, but we try what we can. I think we do a lot of fundraising. As soon as Money fell ill, loads and loads of people. I think people were just felt so helpless, and so they just started running and doing all these events and raising money, and mashallah, we've raised so much, and then that all went through to brain tumor research. They have a centre of excellence at Queen Mary University where they do research just for glioblastoma, which is what the brain cancer that Marnie had. So we set up a fundraising group called Fight for Hope, and anything that we do, any fundraising we do, or anybody does in Marnie's name, will go and to fund the research there. So I think when Marnie was still alive in 2021, we did the first Walk of Hope in Luton, where but back then brain tumor research used to just say it's a walk of hope. I don't know whether it was COVID maybe, but they used to say to people it's walk of hope, just all go and do your own little walks. But I wanted it to be more like a race for life feel. So we organised that for the first time in 2021, and Marnie, again, absolutely mashallah, bravely addressed the crowd at the starting line, and her speech is just absolutely blows your mind. It was quite succinct, but just literally what she said was amazing. She was saying that I'm fortunate that I'm here, and I'm going to fight for she had friends that she'd on this journey had made friends with, and then they sadly passed away. She goes, I've got a voice. I'm going to use my voice to fight for them and for the others. And so, and she was saying, does my life not matter? That's how she felt. She was like, why would my cancer not get the same funding? She would say that it's a tragedy to lose a child, especially a child at the cusp of their life. She was about to leave home and everything. So we do that, and then that's continued since she's passed away. We do that every year, and it tends to be the last Saturday of September, and that's at Wardown Park in Luton. So that's something we do. Yeah, and we just try and do what we can. Amani was involved in a advertising campaign for brain tumor research, and that was hard for her, especially with her changing sort of appearance. But she felt like she had to overcome her fears about what she looked like for the greater good of what the message was. And it was really hard for her. It was really hard for her to see herself on screen and whatever, but she did that. So yeah, we do what we can for brain tumor research. And another thing that Marnie did was the Chat for Amani podcast, which she launched in March is the Brain Tumor Awareness a month, and she launched that in March 2020. And she released 10 podcasts over that time, and it was all just raising awareness about what it's like to get a diagnosis, what it's like to have the treatments, what it's like to wait on a 3-monthly MRI results where literally your life depends on it. The faith and how it affected her faith, and how the faith helped her, how it affected her mental health. She also interviewed Tom Parker from The Wanted, who also had the same glioblastoma as Amani did, and that's quite a fun, but really good, insightful episode. And then her final one, which she recorded, she already knew. Her doctors already said to her this was towards the end. This was December 21, so the oncologist has already said, look, there's nothing more we can do. She'd had her final MRI, and it literally spread horrendously throughout her brain and into her spine. And obviously she was very upset about that. But during that time, Imam Umar Suleiman had got in touch with us got in touch with my husband through Twitter. And he was really kind. He said, look, any way that I can help you, then I'm happy to help you. So he would he would had a phone conversation with all of us together. And he had a phone conversation with me and my husband about, obviously what we were facing, what was to come very shortly. And then Amani then, one day she was quite upset about the fact that there was no more treatment. And she got, she cried, and we spoke about. I mean, I don't really actually remember the conversation, but I would guess it was totally about, her fear of what's to come. And yeah, I don't know how we answered things like that, but she was upset for a while, and then she said, "What can I do? What else can I do?" And I said, "Well, you've got your podcast, and from a gift from Allah, we've literally got this contact with Omar Suleiman, which I said, well, could we ask him if you could do a podcast?" And that was a really, I think, out of everything, I think that's helped a lot of people, mashallah. I think a lot of people know Amani through that podcast. And it was literally, and the next day, after being so distraught that night, the next night, she was literally had a little pen and paper, and she was thinking about every sort of question and crisis of faith that we had
Mm.
throughout, from her diagnosis to there. She was just thinking of all those things that we were grappling with, and she
Yeah.
just asked him all of those. Yeah, and it was at a time where her deterioration was, her short time memory loss was going,
Mm.
her mobility was going,
Mm.
and really she was struggling day to day at home, but she still sat
Mm.
for 2 hours on a podcast and spoke with Umar Suleiman, and
Wow.
and it's a really
Mm.
special, yeah. So they're all the sort of things that we've been doing, just to try and raise awareness of. I suppose it's dubbed, it's about the raising awareness of brain cancer, but also raising awareness about Islam and how it can
Yeah.
help. Because we are fortunate; we've got a lot of non-Muslims on our page, and I think we hope that it's sort of broken down some barriers for them as well. It's so easy to if you don't ever have any contact with anybody in the Muslim faith, to maybe be, I don't know, not understand them. But I hope that we've put a human face, to Muslims, for non-Muslims, and maybe even given them a little bit of an insight into our faith as well, and demystified it a bit maybe. So that's what we've tried to do. And it's not even that we try. This was all a big plan. It all just unfolded. It just literally it just unfolded the way it did, and it's all from Allah. So alhamdulillah.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I remember listening to that Imam Omar Suleiman podcast with Amani, and it is absolutely amazing, honestly. And the work that you're doing is so it's so great. So
Mm,
may Allah give you the strength to keep going. But also, I hope that more people, myself and our community included, I hope that we're able to support you in that,
yeah.
because I think, rightly so, that it's absolutely shocking that there is such little funding for a
Mm,
cancer that is completely affecting so many people and
yeah.
having absolutely devastating consequences for families.
Yeah. That's right. Definitely.
Um, but yeah, Yasmin, thank you so much for your time today. It's been really wonderful speaking to you, and I hope that people listening to this find some comfort and
Inshallah.
support and healing through
Yeah.
this.
I hope so.
But
I hope so.
yeah,
Yeah.
thank you so much, and we'll be keeping Amani and otherwise, and
Ameen.
you
And to you,
also.
man. Jazakallah khairan.
I hope you loved listening to this episode and found things that will stay with you. I'd love to hear from you, so please do reach out on social media and don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a review, as it can really help.